What is happening out there, Roto Scouts baseball fans? Welcome to the jam-packed 12-game Tuesday slate. We're going to go through this bad boy game by game. Whoop, let me mute myself on the other tab. Amateurish, this guy. God. I'm just getting started. I just mentioned in the chat, I just finished up the article. I actually kind of cheated on the Coors Field game. Just kind of said like, hey, it's Coors Field game. Roster the bats. Kind of obvious here. But I want to take a half a sec while I'm teeing up the start of the show here and just grab some of these confirmed lineups because I don't have all the confirmed lineups loaded up yet. So bear with me, guys. I'll talk through a couple quick things. Hyper interesting slate, I think. It's a weird pitching board. There's a couple guys who, like, I wrote it as there's no true ace. I guess Kevin Gausman probably qualifies at this point as a true ace. But like him and Joe Musgrove, I've always had as maybe a tick down. With what Gausman's done this year, though, it's fair to call him an ace. But there's like him, there's Musgrove. There's a couple of interesting pitching spots. But overall, I think we've got a broad board. Apologies for not looking at you guys in the eye, looking into the camera when I'm doing this. But I'm looking over here trying to do these lineups at the same time. But I think it's an interesting pitching board in that there is a pretty broad range of like okay-ish third, fourth type starters, guys who could get by, guys who might give us a good game, guys who we don't necessarily need to throw bats at. There's a couple clunky spots. Definitely the Dodgers going up against Luke Weaver in Cincinnati. As of the last time I looked, they were drawing the they were drawing a total that was higher than the two teams in Coors Field at 6 runs in that spot. I don't know if that's changed just yet, but that looks like an outrageous opportunity. You've obviously got the Coors Field game in terms of the bats, but I think there's a couple other interesting spots to go to for bats, including the debut of Elly De La Cruz, which is a awesome spot. It's a fun prospect to get. You get him at the dead minimum price on the DraftKings slate because he was already up. FanDuel added him to the pool. So if you guys grab your salaries for whatever you do for your processes early in the day, make sure you go back if you're on FanDuel and grab the new pool that has Elly in it. He came in at a $2,800 price. So good value on the FanDuel slate for the rookie. But obviously a smash spot on the DK slate. I expect he's going to be popular. Like, he's no secret. He's coming up with a massive amount of buzz. All of it is deserved. The kid just destroys pitches. He hits the ball hard like Judge and Stanton hit the ball hard. Granted, it's in the minor leagues, so take it for what it's worth. But like, that's the level of premium contact that we talk about with this kid. It's outrageous. He's also got like dynamite speed, just like blazingly fast, big time stolen base upside. So there's some thought about maybe he strikes out a little bit too much when he reaches the show. This year he's kind of kept it semi under control. I think he's like mid-20s for strikeouts this season, whereas in previous years in the minors he's been pushing that 30% range, but in the minors he's always been able to draw walks, so it's always kind of offset. There's questions about whether he'll do that in the show, but especially for his debut, right? Nobody's really going to care. People are going to want to roster this kid. I want to roster this kid. I think it's going to be fun, and I think he's going to have a dynamite career. I'm not really in that camp of people who think he won't be able to put it together in the show. I definitely think we're going to get a nice career out of Elly. I said it in the article. If you play season long and for some strange reason he happens to be available on your waiver wire, run, do not walk. Run to your waiver wire and add him to your team or put in a max fab bid because he's going to be special. Yeah, Larry, he had 3 exit velocity, was 115 mile an hour in a single game last week. He's done that a couple times this season. I don't know if the mark was exactly 115, but he's had a couple games this season where like multiple hits that he had were better than like anything that Judge and Stanton had done in the StatCast era, or maybe not better, but like rivaled what those guys were doing since StatCast started. So it's just outrageous contact in the show. Similar to Cruz from Pittsburgh, but more power. Yeah, that's not a bad comp. Certainly positionally they're comparable. O'Neal Cruz has that outrageous body. He's like super tall and like lean and lithe, and just a strange like figure on the field and you can get thoughts of like what that might add up to as over time, but unfortunately we've just never really seen him be able to stay fully healthy, and that lanky body might be a part of that. But yeah, that's not an awful comp to start, but yeah, more power upside, definite blazing speed, interesting player, so that's going to be one to watch for sure. But let's dive into this thing. We've got a massive slate, not a lot of time to talk about it. I loaded up whatever confirmed lineups we've got. Let's get into this. Oh, I didn't realize that I didn't have this on the screen the whole time. You guys were just looking at me. Sorry about that. Let me share this. I thought you guys were at least getting to watch me put these lineups in or something rather than staring at my ugly mug. Here we go. All right, first game on deck, Yanks and the White Sox. Interesting spot, I think. We've got Lucas Giolito not quite pitching to, Lucas Giolito standards in terms of the strikeout rate. The ERA is 4.08, the xFIP is 4.45, 12.3% swinging strikes, 28% CSW percentage, and some premium contact allowed this season. 10.3% on the barrels, 40% hard hits, 3.81% home run rate. He's just been not quite himself. Joker, be quiet, buddy. Go lay down. I'm not talking to you. 25.4% strikeout rate last year and a much better 27.9% the year before that. We've seen Giolito as a better version of Giolito, right? We've seen him pitch better than he has this year. I don't write him off on this slate, particularly against the Yankees lineup that, let me just make sure, I was not expecting the big man, and yep, shit. No Aaron Judge for the Yankees. That's a big ding to the Yankees lineup. Even with Stanton back, even with Donaldson back, like, you take Aaron Judge out of here, that has a big, big impact on what the Yankees can do at the plate. So that's a little bit of an uptick for Giolito. It was baked into the projections. We weren't expecting it. You can see 25.4. That puts him like middle of the board today. And I think any of the struggles, the strikeout rate, this is still fine, above average-ish kind of a strikeout number. So that's fine for a $9,000, $8,900 pitcher. We're not getting that elite version of Giolito, probably for these prices. But if we do get that elite version of Giolito where he comes out with that, 30% strikeout stuff, that could be a really nice bargain at these prices. Keep the Yankees off the board in terms of their home run upside. You do still have Stanton to worry about. You've certainly got Anthony Rizzo in that lineup to worry about. Donaldson for whatever he's worth. Gleyber, obviously a good play from the top of the lineup. Gleyber's having a nice little season. 164 ISO's not great. 9 home runs is fine. 6 stolen bases, fine. 11% better than average creating runs, fine. But what I like, and it's going a little bit under discussed, shaved 10 points off his strikeout rate year over year. That's pretty damn good. 6.8% walks up to 10.2%. So a nice little improvement there that I think over time will start translating. His barrels and his hard contact have come down a lot. So I think he's swinging less aggressively in this role. But I think some of it will come back and it'll like balance out to a pretty interesting hitter. He's a guy I don't want the Yankees to give up on. He's always involved in like trade rumors and stuff. And I hope they keep him around. Top prospect who has produced in the majors, has his struggles, but I do like Gleyber. So if you're going to Yankees against Giolito, which I do think is viable, Yankee Stadium game, all the power upside through the top 5 here, I think that's viable, but it's really restricted to the top 5. Willie Calhoun, 2,100, 2,600, a former high-end prospect, hasn't done much in his major league career at all, which is why he bounced around and is now at the bottom of the Yankees batting order for these low prices. 241, 314, 380 this year, 92 WRC plus. There's not a lot of production from Willie Calhoun. He's got the 3 oddball home runs in the small sample. Like, could he go out and do something? 42.1% hard hits, doesn't strike out that much. So as a guy who puts the ball in play behind these other hitters, yeah, you could probably get away with some Willie Calhoun. I like Volpe, the idea of a great rookie shortstop potentially coming up for the Yankees and everything. He's produced in the counting stats, 9 home runs and 13 stolen bases, but the 193, 268, 363 is concerning. 25% below average creating runs. He's playing every single day, and that's despite the good stolen bases. Like, he's just not getting on enough. A 268 clip for getting on base, that's not what we need from this kid. So the barrels are good, the hard hits are good, the infrequent home run output is fine, the stolen bases are nice, but Volpe's got to do more. He's not high priced, 3,900, 2,900 for DFS purposes, perfectly fine. And I think he's interesting in that 5 spot, particularly if he's a little bit under owned compared to some of his teammates here. But it's not a great spot for a kid who strikes out at a 30% clip going up against Giolito too. Even a low end version of Giolito, I think, could find a few bonus strikeouts from Volpe today. Falefa, Trevino, and Trevino in the back end. Jake Bauers, maybe a little sneaky, 2,400, 2,500, 5 home runs after a big day on Sunday, 286 ISO and just 76 plate appearances. Not a great player by any means, but a guy who's put bat on ball effectively this season and comes at very cheap prices. It's not like his price is shot up based on a couple good games, but not a lot there. Certainly a week back Final Four for the Yanks. Clark Schmidt on the other side, I need to just improve the pace here. We're first team in the first game, and I'm already falling behind what pace should be. Clark Schmidt, 7,900, 7,700. I think he's kind of interesting. The numbers struggle a little bit from some short starts, some quick hooks, and some inherited runners that were allowed to score by relievers after Boone pulled him in tight spots in like the 5th inning and a few early starts. He got a little bit more leash in a couple recent starts. 26% strikeout rate is very good. 11% swinging strikes is good. 27.6% CSW. I'd like to see him throw a little bit more in terms of the called strikes, but I think we'll get there. He's been effective this year. 47% hard hits is a problem. 91.6 miles an hour average exit velo is a problem. 9.8% barrels also a problem. 3.2% home run rate, that could go up. Yankee Stadium game, that's where your concern comes in. But I think at price, he's definitely on the SP2 board for DK, and I think he can get away with a few shares. He's a mid-range projection on the FanDuel slate at 77. The idea of a quality start is not out of the question. The idea of a win is not out of the question. Strikeouts are definitely going to be there. Abundant strikeouts through this confirmed White Sox lineup. 24.9% strikeout rate for the confirmed guys. That includes Tim Anderson and Andrew Benintendi up at the top. 18.1% and 14.7% for those two hitters, but they're struggling badly in terms of what they typically do well. Anderson's usually double-digit homers and double-digit steals, very good average, usually over 300, gets on base at an aggressive clip. Benintendi's usually a good, very, very good average and on-base guy who is good for correlated scoring. Neither of them are doing much of anything this year. Anderson missed a lot of time, but over 182 plate appearances at this point, 0 home runs, 6 stolen bases, 23% worse than average creating runs. Benintendi 11% worse than average creating runs. 0 home runs. You don't expect a lot of home runs, but you'd expect him to have 2 or 3 by now. So bad output there, and then only 275, 330 in terms of the batting average on base. So kind of weak in the triple slashes and the output for those two hitters. So if you're scratching them in terms of their quality, what they've provided for DFS purposes, then you're looking at a hefty strikeout totals for Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Joan Moncada. Andrew Vaughn comes back with 18.3 ahead of Gavin Sheets, who's only at 17.7. So those two guys are maybe interesting. And then you draw power from that core of the hitters that I just named there. But all of those guys strike out aggressively. So those could be a few ticks in Schmidt's favor. They could put a few zeros in a lineup. But I would also go to some of those bats, right? Especially if I'm rostering a fair share of Schmidt, I would look to some hedge stacks of White Sox, and it would be those guys that I named. I think there should be particular focus on the lefties. They're the guys who will hit from the left side of the plate, which is basically limited to Sheets and Moncada in this lineup. But Schmidt struggles a little bit with lefties. So I think maybe those two hitters are a little bit interesting. Like if I'm last man in between Vaughn and Sheets, I might stick Sheets in a few more of those spots. Not necessarily more overall than Vaughn if I'm building a lot of them, but maybe a few more Sheets shares than one would normally expect, if that makes sense. Hopefully that all made sense. Bottom of the lineup, Romy Gonzalez, Sebi Zavala. At least they're not Elvis Andrus. Second game. Interesting spot. Mitch Keller has been pitching outrageous. We were all expecting it for years and years. I think everybody on the ship gave up. Everybody on the bandwagon hopped off and wandered off into the woods. And then Mitch Keller decided to pitch really well this season. 30.4% strikeouts, only 5.6% walks. Very good in terms of the swinging strikes, the CSW, a 3.25 ERA, a 2.99 xFIP, 74 2/3 in 12 starts, giving you good depth every time out, not really giving up much premium contact. 10.4% barrels is a little high, but he cuts that by allowing only 86.4 miles an hour average exit velo and 31.3% hard hits overall. So 2.29% home run rate, that's nothing to really worry about here. And just going up against this low-end Athletics lineup that, damn it, I fixed a bunch of those things we were talking about in the model, like the rookie call-ups and stuff today, but I forgot to fix JJ Bleday's stupid name in my naming table. So he's missing from the numbers here, but a couple of lefty bats if you're going to some of these Athletics. Will Mitch keep it up? Yeah, that's the question, Anthony. And at some point, I think, I don't think it goes pop completely for the season because he has put things together for full seasons over time, but like he always comes in hyped, struggles, and then kind of claws it back in the second half, which is exactly what he did last year. This year, starting strong, does it fall apart in the second half? It sure might. And that's kind of the idea with this guy. I think there is the potential to grab a few, very few athletic stacks here against him. You guys know I don't like Brent Rooker, but some of the lefties here are interesting. Bleday's kind of interesting. Ryan Noda, definitely interesting. Getting on base at a 403 clip, creating runs 47% better than average. Now across 201 plate appearances. That's getting pretty real. It's ridiculous that he strikes out 33.8% of the time and still manages to produce that level of on base, that level of WRC plus, but he's doing it. 19.4% walks. He's involved all the time. If you want to roster Rooker, there's the obvious idea of power there, but we're still at that same 11 home run total. I like Seth Brown better. He hits from the left side of the plate. 15.9% barrel rate, 45.5% hard hits that I actually do believe in. Power and some speed. 25 homers and I think 11 stolen bases last season without scrolling over. Aledmys Diaz, fine. Jace Peterson, fine. Jonah Bride, fine. Mix and match guys for cheap prices. Shea Langoliers is an interesting enough catcher. 9.8% barrels, 7 home runs on the season. Doesn't hit for average or produce much, but the odd duck home run at cheap prices, low ownership from Langoliers, always on the board there. So I think you can go to a small handful of athletic stacks, but I don't want to undersell the opportunity for Mitch. He projects as my highest projected starter on the board by a pretty wide margin. This is aggressively high. He's pulling a big innings total and a lot of strikeouts in the model, but I don't necessarily think it's wrong. This is a bad athletics team, and he's been pitching lights out this season. So I'm going to have a bunch of Mitch. I might hedge it with some athletics. Don't hedge it with Orioles. That would be weird. James Caprillion on the other side, probably going to grab a few shares of Pirates bats at the very least against this guy. Just not a major league pitcher, really. 5.90 xFIP underneath an 8.12 ERA. Striking out 20.9%, but walking 12.1%. There's just not a lot to see here. A 1.81 whip. The swinging strike rate is actually pretty good at 11.3% if you want to find some positive note, but just not a good pitcher. 90 miles an hour average. Exit velo, 40% hard hits, pushing a 4% home run rate on a decent barrel rate. There's enough talent in the projected version of the Pirates lineup. You've got Marcano up top, followed by the stars in Reynolds and McCutchen. Stars relatively speaking to being Pittsburgh Pirates, but decent counting stats, good production out of both of those guys. 118 WRC plus for Reynolds, 124 for McCutchen, a nice bounce back. Jack Sawinski, I think is very, very cheap. 3,100 across the two sites. 11 very real home runs out of Sawinski in 189 plate appearances, a 255 ISO, 16.5% barrels, 43.3% hard hits. There's nothing that's unbelievable about that production. He hit 19 homers in 506 plate appearances last year. It's an uptick, but I think it's kind of an expected uptick. So I'm kind of surprised he's only 3,000 on DK. That's a nice little bargain going up against Caprillion here. I like the opportunity for Sawinski. You can see he leads the team in my home run model here. So I think there's upside. I think Santana's not playing. That would make sense, and that's not really a ding to the lineup if Carlos Santana doesn't go. He's been pretty awful all season long, so only 3.9% barrels, 32.9% hard hits. Might be a bonus if they Connor Joe at first base. Yeah, that's an uptick then. So let me see if that lineup's available for us. Yeah, a couple more dropped, including this one. So yeah, we get Connor Joe hitting fifth. That's a little bit of an uptick. Palacios, Brian Hayes, Rodolfo Castro, Austin Hedges to round it out. I don't want to spend too much time on the Pirates, but I do think it's an interesting enough spot going up against a lousy pitcher. They were pulling a pretty good run total, if I remember correctly, as well. Their run total was sitting. This wasn't updated since earlier when I started writing my my article, but yeah, 5.27 earlier in the day. So healthy run total when you think of what the Pittsburgh Pirates are normally totaled at. You can tell how good that opportunity is. So maybe I undersold it a little bit. Maybe we're a little bit more interested in the Pirates. Marcano at the top, 2,100 to 2,400. Productive enough guy, 112 WRC plus over 117 plate appearances, 3 homers, 4 stolen bases. For those prices, he's productive at short second base. Connor Joe has been productive through the start of the season and comes at a fair price. He cooled off after a roaring hot start, but I think he's a better fifth option than Carlos Santana was, like we were talking about in the chat there. So that's a good spot. I like that spot. So for me, it's Keller and it's Pirates and maybe a couple hedges of A's. No interest in Caprillion at all. Tommy Hendry. What's up, Hendry? Henry going up against Jake Irvin. Matchup of two lousy pitchers. I like the spot for Diamondbacks bats quite a bit better than I like the spot for Nationals bats, but I do think you can throw some of the righties in the Nationals lineup back against Tommy Henry here. 15% strikeout rate for Henry, 3.59% home run rate allowed, plenty of premium contact in an 8.8% barrel rate. 3.73 ERA is fine, but the 5.43 xFIP I think is more honest. 9.6% walks. I don't think much of this pitcher, so I think you can grab some of the Nationals. They're friskier against left-handed pitching for this season. Lane Thomas, Luis Garcia, Joey Meneses, Stone Garrett. I think there's a little bit of power potential in some of those guys. They're better for stringing together hits. I think, than for their power potential here. That's typically how they've gotten their runs when they've gone off for some runs. I think you get a little bit of power upside in like the Garrett, the Meneses, and maybe Lane Thomases of the world against the lefty. And then I like Keibert Ruiz. I've talked about him a few times in recent spots. 10.6% barrels, a 38.2% hard hit, but only slugging 384. His X slug is in the 500s somewhere. He only strikes out 7.8% of the time. In terms of the strikeout rate, that's like Will Smith level from the Dodgers. He's obviously an outrageously better hitter in terms of his power, what he does with the stick, with his triple slash numbers. I'm not saying this kid is Will Smith, but I'm saying he could be a very interesting power hitter who puts bat on ball with a lot of frequency very soon. So 3,600, 2,900. If I'm rostering Nationals, I am including Keibert Ruiz, particularly where you need catchers on DK. I think he's very interesting there. Definitely more interesting than the Dom Smith, Alex Call, CJ Abrams part of the lineup. Call, maybe you throw into a couple lineups as a righty bat from the bottom of the batting order for cheap prices. Heimer Candelario, much better on the opposite side of splits, going up against a right-handed pitcher as a lefty in terms of his power output, specifically this season. And over time, the power has just been better in the other side of splits. He's hit for a little bit better average than I thought he had, and a little bit better run creation than I thought he had on this side of splits. But the power is what I was thinking of. It comes mostly on the opposite side. So I don't love Candelario. If you're rostering a bunch of Nationals, you of course include him. He's hitting fourth. You don't want to skip him in every single stack. But out of the top end players up here, maybe him or Luis Garcia, who again I didn't fix the pitcher thing, but don't worry about the Luis Garcia price. He obviously doesn't cost 9,200. Oh wait, I didn't talk about the Diamondbacks. Diamondbacks facing Jake Irvin. This is a potentially killer spot for the day. They were totaled at 5.38, so another highly total team from a really productive lineup. I think there's power available going up against Jake Irvin here. You can see a 17.7% strikeout rate, 13.7% walks, a 5.67 ERA, 5.87 xFIP, 9.8% barrels, 40.2% hard hits. There's tons of premium contact available here for a fairly hard hitting team. There's a decent level of hard hits here. Good level of barrels. Nobody outrageous for barrels, but 8s and 9s in the barrel range is good. Got a lot of good mid-level power hitters. And then Christian Walker, who I think is a very good power hitter. Walker leads the team with 12 home runs. He was my home run pick for the day, 13.34 in the model. Puts him among the top overall hitters in the model. I think he was like 3rd or 4th overall. So I really like the spot for Christian Walker. 4,100, 3,100 is too cheap for that player at first base. So you go to Christian Walker all day. You string him together with Ketel Marte, Corbin Carroll. Those are your premium options from this team, but I like Pavin Smith at the top of the lineup, 3,600, 2,900, 206, 324, 365. It's not looking great in terms of the triple slash, but 5 home runs and 148 plate appearances, a sturdy little 8.3% barrels, 43.8% hard hits. You can definitely get away with cheap Pavin Smith at the top of the lineup. Correlated scoring, a little bit of individual upside. Emmanuel Rivera, multi-position, 3,000 on the DK slate. That's fine. 2,600 at third base. I'd probably rather occupy my third base spot with somebody other than Rivera or Rojas on the FanDuel slate. They're fine if you're building a bunch of Diamondback stacks. I wouldn't say you're making a mistake there by any means. Rojas has a moderate amount of power, decent wheels. If he gets on base, he might be running. Rivera hasn't done a ton. 337, 364, 53 is very good, but only a 116 ISO, 1 home run in the 89 plate appearances. Good for correlated scoring and has hit the ball fairly hard, 51.3% hard hit rate there. So cheap option in the middle of the lineup there. You can get away with it. Gabriel Moreno, good young catcher, 282, 319, 369, 14% below average creating runs, 2 home runs on the season, but for 2,800, he's viable, particularly if you're going to a bunch of Diamondbacks. McCarthy and Perdomo at the bottom of the lineup, too. Another pair of interesting plays. I think this lineup plays 1 through 9. I wouldn't get carried away with this part of it necessarily, but I like the top 4. These guys are usable. All these guys are mix and match at worst with significant upside. Perdomo, 5 home runs, 5 steals in that outrageous start to the season. Still 32% better than average creating runs, despite cooling significantly. McCarthy has struggled, but a lot of speed, decent power. He's stolen 10 bases despite getting on at 267 clip, hitting 187 over 101 plate appearances. That's actually a really high total for this and this and this, or this and this and this. So McCarthy's interesting enough down there. So 1 through 9 from the Diamondbacks in varying shares for me. Some Nationals bats, neither pitcher. Astros and the Blue Jays. Let me see what's dropped into chat. Like that they're finally batting Carroll third more instead of six behind Longo. Yeah, I like that as well. Longo you get mostly against the lefties, in a platoon role these days. He's been productive, but yeah, I love Carroll hitting third. I think that's a great spot, hitting him behind Marte and ahead of Walker there. Astros still dinged with no Jose Altuve, Mauricio Dubon leading off, but this is a pitching spot for my money. Both teams, for as good as both of these teams are, both carrying fairly low totals. I do think you mix in shares of both of these teams, but lower priority than normal. I believe more in the pitching side of this one. They'll be low owned for their talents, so they'll probably be a little bit contrarian, a little bit sneaky. You could probably even say getting above the field is okay with the Astros and the Blue Jays bats here, but I definitely think you want to be invested in Hunter Brown and in Kevin Gausman. Gausman, like I said, top of the show, one of the best pitchers in the league this year. He's just been excellent. 13.2% swinging strike rate, 29.3% CSW, adding up to a 32.9% strikeout rate overall in 75 innings over 12 starts. He's been pitching deep. He's been pitching effectively. There's a little bit of hard hit. There's a little bit of barrel rate here on a not low launch angle, but it hasn't hurt him. 1.97% in the terms of the home runs. Probably a little bit of happenstance baked in here. If this rises up to the 3 and change percent range by the end of the season, so be it. He's still a ridiculous strikeout pitcher. Is this a tough matchup for Gausman? Asks Anthony Fowler. Yeah, it is. The Astros are a good team. They've got Jordan Alvarez in the middle of that lineup. They've got Kyle Tucker in the middle of that lineup. They've also got a couple odds and ends type hitters like Corey Julks, Jake Myers, Martin Maldonado. Flat dead Jose Abreu plays every day still. Mauricio Dubon in the top. Jeremy Pena hasn't done much. So it's not like the elite, outrageously good Astros from a couple of years ago. They're presumably not cheating anymore, so that takes a little bit off the top for them as well. And you can see in the run totals, this is what I was talking about. 7.5, might have gone up to 8 over the course of the afternoon here, but that would still only put this at like 4 and 4.4 or something like that. Low run totals for what these teams typically get, for what these teams typically do. So I think that just supports the idea that we want the pitching side of this one. You can see both guys project fairly well in the model. I believe more on the Gausman side for cost, 11,000, 11,1. He's expensive, but I definitely think you go there. He's been one of the most reliable guys in the game this year. Certainly more reliable over the long term than Mitch Keller. Obviously a much worse matchup, higher price. Or no, I'm sorry, Mitch is higher priced. At least on FanDuel he's higher priced. I think Gausman might be a little bit above on the DK slate. So you're buying Gausman, you're buying his higher strikeout rate, his overtime talent, but in a worse matchup overall. Let me take a sip of this. That's better. I had a tickle in my throat. Hunter Brown on the other side, rookie, been outrageously good this year. Came into the show basically fully formed and has not looked back. 62 and a third, 11 starts, 28.8% strikeout rate, a 2.98 xFIP, a 3.61 ERA. Has given up a little bit of premium contact, kind of along the lines of Gausman, right? We're seeing a 44% hard hit rate and 8.2% barrel rate. But what he does to keep power in check is cut launch angle. 4.6 degree average launch angle. We've talked about launch angle a number of times when it comes to pitching. I do think it's a fair barometer of a pitcher's ability to keep the ball in the yard. If a guy has a sustained ability to check launch angle to limits like this, keep the ball on the ground, high ground ball rate is another way to look at that. It's a good indicator that he's not going to give up that many home runs. When you look at hitters, you don't necessarily want to focus on launch angle because a lot gets lost in their samples with just like high pops, fly balls that that don't do anything, that are just high fly balls, cans of corn, as so in the baseball the parlance of our times, to quote the Big Lebowski. So I think that's the right way to look at Hunter Brown here is through that prism of limiting launch angle when it comes to that premium contact. That's why his home run rate's only at 1.56. Going up against the Blue Jays, you're obviously dealing with a dangerous lineup. What the Blue Jays have up top is 3 star caliber hitters with tons of power, good amount of speed, excellent run creation ability, despite what George Springer's been mired in his little slump this year, and an excellent ability to avoid strikeouts. 16% and matching 15.6% strikeout rates for Springer, and then for Bo Bichette and Vladdy Guerrero. 3 fantastic hitters that the rookie's going to have to work his way through. So if I'm picking sides in this one, or if I can only have one of them, I'm taking Gausman even at the higher price. I think his matchup is better. I think he's the more proven option here. But don't sleep on Hunter Brown, especially if he ends up low owned because of the matchup, which I think he might. tight, given several other good options, several cheaper options that look equally good, several more expensive options. I think Hunter Brown maybe gets a little bit lost in the shuffle here. So I think he's a good opportunity to exploit some low ownership if that's where you get him. At the same time, like I said, grab some bats, even push the bats maybe a little bit over the field. If these guys, especially the core hitters, these guys will probably be at worst in the high single digits, if not the low double digits. But if you get a bunch of these guys and a bunch of like these guys for the Astros in like the low single digits, that's a really good way to just string together a couple of those premium bats and a couple of those guys in very low owned stacks that just aren't going to be popular, will be fairly unique combinations around the industry. And then by definition, you'll be getting to either shares of like Mitch Keller, the premium pitching options, or maybe some offset, differentiated pitching options to even further push you away from like the chalky ownership on, for whatever it is, on any of the high end hitters in these lineups. So I think you can attack the lineups. Obviously, if you're looking at the Astros, it's Jordan, it's Kyle Tucker, and then it's whatever else falls in. Pena's probably been the next best guy, along with Alex Bregman. Everybody else is kind of meh. Corey Jolks, big night last night, obviously. Cheap prices, still only an 85 WRC plus for the season, though. Jake Myers producing runs, 16% better than average, over 169 plate appearances. Cheap and semi-interesting late in the lineup. The Blue Jays, it's that top three. Brandon Belt, very interesting in the cleanup role for only 25-26. Don't sleep on him if you are going to Blue Jays. He's viable from the left side of the plate against the rookie here. Maybe he gets into one, but again, those power marks are kind of checked, right? 2.84% in the home run model is low. The 4s and the 5s on the top three hitters are pretty low. Whit Merrifield, I think if they get to Brown, I think he's a guy who could be a part of it, given his ability to get on base, given what he does, 16 stolen bases in 216 plate appearances. He's a correlated scoring guy who could get involved, be kind of a catalyst, help turn the lineup over, hand it off to Dalton Varsho, who comes in and drives one. So I think Varsho's a little bit interesting from late. Kirk, Kiermaier, Espinal, all mix and match parts from late in the lineup. You can take them or leave them. So pitching spot with minor shares of hedge stacks on the bats on either side. Guardians, Red Sox, another interesting pitching matchup. Both guys projecting fairly well for me. I think if I had to choose between the two, I'm probably taking a few shares of Paxton, I think. Just because I believe in it a little bit more in the current form. It's a small sample, 4 starts, 19 innings, 33.8% strikeout rate. Came out of the gate firing. He's given up some power. Most of that came in one bad start out of the 4 starts. He had 3 good, 1 bad, 13% barrels overall, a 41.3% hard hit overall, 5% home run rate. But I'm interested in the strikeout upside, even against a Guardians team that is very good at limiting strikeouts. I think there's at least enough to justify the $8,600, $9,400 investment. The DraftKings price is fairly cheap. He's a usable part, James Paxton, on both sites. I wouldn't get completely carried away with it just because there's a lot of pitching options that I think are roughly equivalent, and I don't fully buy into the Paxton upside here, but against a non-threatening Cleveland lineup, even if he doesn't come out for major strikeout upside, they just haven't been doing anything at the dish this year, not hitting home runs, not getting on base, not hitting, not stringing together hits for correlated scoring and sequencing. There's just not a lot to like in the Cleveland lineup. So I don't think you really need to go there that frequently. If you do go to Cleveland bats, it's Jose Ramirez and then whatever else falls into the lineup with him. Probably some Josh Naylor, maybe some Josh Bell, but he's been bad. Dude hit 27 home runs 2 years ago and has just been flat ever since. 123 ISO, 4 home runs this year in 219 plate appearances. Need a lot more out of Josh Bell if you're a Guardians fan. Stephen Kwan hasn't done much in terms of his correlated scoring. His ability to get on base has been in check this year. Gabriel Arias hasn't done a ton. 214, 308, 379, and 93 WRC plus. 4 homers and 117 plate appearances. That's okay. Decent hard hit rate, but not a lot there. The bottom of the lineup gets even worse. Andres Jimenez, badly disappointing. Only 3 homers this season, a 114 ISO, 88 WRC plus. Zunino hasn't hit for his usually good contact, even in those rare instances. 3 home runs in 3 home runs in 125 plate appearances, but just the 6.9% barrel rate, the 34.5% hard hit in the small sample. That's not Zunino-like, and he's still striking out at a 42.4% clip. No, that was last year. Oh, no, that is this year. Sorry. 37.4% last year. 42.4%. That's a lot of strikeouts. Supports the idea of additional strikeout upside for Paxton. But a lot of the other hitters are good at limiting strikeouts, like I said. Shane Bieber, I do not know what to do with. I updated some of the numbers in the model, and he's still like, it doesn't want to let me force him into a lousy projection like I kind of wanted to. 32 and change is an effective FanDuel projection at 96.92 here. 16.9% strikeouts on the season, 10.1% swinging strikes, 29% CSW. Doesn't really align well with a 16.9% strikeout rate. So I think there's at least the idea that he gets back to, low 20s. Is that too much to ask from Shane Bieber? But it's insane. If you look at his game log, 8 of 12 starts this year, he's struck out exactly 4 hitters, regardless of whether he pitches 4 innings or 7 or 8 innings. It's been really weird for Shane Bieber this year. Overall, I don't think he's been as bad as people might be thinking. There's been a lot of hard hits, 47.3% hard hits, a lot of exit velo, 91.6 miles an hour exit velo, but 2.55% home runs, a 3.72 ERA on the surface, only a 4.33 xFIP below that, so not like under the surface pitching a lot poorer than the ERA shows. I think he's a little bit okay, figures things out. Like I just don't know. I don't really buy into it. Like I said, I wanted to get away from it. The model's not letting me. The model wants me to play this guy. He'll be in smaller doses, I think, than some of the other options that I want to get to. But I think there's enough here that we can go to shares of Shane Bieber today. Hopefully he ends up low owned for our troubles. Like if I go through that much pain in deciding if I want to roster a guy at a fair price, and a guy who used to be an uber talented strikeout pitcher and a very, very good pitcher before some devastating injuries, like I forget where I was going with that. I would hope that he would come out low owned. So hopefully that's the case. You get him against a Red Sox lineup that it's really 4 deep. Verdugo, Yoshida, Turner, and Devers. And even Devers is kind of struggling. Only a 105 WRC plus for Devers. All the power in the world, 13 home runs, a 241 ISO, but only 5% better than average creating runs. I need more from you, Rafael Devers. What's going on this year? 13.1% barrels, 53.1% hard hits. Probably a lot of happenstance there. Probably a lack of support from some other guys in the lineup impacting that. Justin Turner is cheap, capable as a veteran. Yoshida's been their best player overall, 142 WRC plus. I like him hitting second here. Verdugo Yoshida is a nice way to start this lineup. Pair of lefties there, and then lefty Rafael Devers to throw at Bieber. That's potentially effective. Low strikeout rates for all 3 of those guys at the top of the lineup as well. So challenging spot for Bieber, but you get high elevated strikeouts from Tristan Casas, Enrique Hernandez, Jarren Duran, Emmanuel Valdez, and Reese McGuire through the bottom of the lineup, and not one of those guys has been what I would call good this year. Duran started out good, but he cooled off pretty quickly and pretty aggressively. So the 105 WRC plus, that's come down a lot. 3 home runs, 7 stolen bases. Everything is dropping outside of those counting stats. He's been good. He's cheap. You can go to him. He's a lefty, in a good spot here, or a potentially good spot here. But I think that supports the idea of maybe some upside for Shane Bieber. Do not get carried away with it. I don't plan to get carried away with it. If you see me with like 100 shares of Shane Bieber, that would be tragic. If you see me with like 20 shares of Shane Bieber, I probably didn't have time to whittle it down as much as I wanted to. 15 feels about right. 10% of a FanDuel slate, maybe I get there. We'll see what the ownership comes out as. I do think you can roster Red Sox against him, particularly the lefties. There's going to be some contact available unless he finds his strikeout form. So it's basically the guys that I named. It's Verdugo, it's Yoshida, it's Devers. Certainly Justin Turner at his cheap prices, that good capable bat there. Casas you can throw in here. What I believe in with Casas is the barrel rate and the hard hit rate there. Those are good marks, and he's walking at a decent clip. So you hope I don't hope because I'm a Yankees fan, but Red Sox fans are certainly hoping that that comes around in terms of the triple slash, the power production, but it hasn't been pretty for Casas so far this year. Meanwhile, Bobby Dahlbeck is absolutely raking in AAA. Guy needs to trade the guy. If you don't want to play him, if he killed somebody in the front office's family or whatever the case is, just freaking trade the guy. Let him play somewhere else. Drives me nuts. Bobby Dahlbeck belongs in the show. I think we've touched on everything, including my pal Bobby Dahlbeck, my favorite. He's not really my favorite, but it drives me bananas that he doesn't play in the show. Reds and the Dodgers. Like I said at the top of the show, earlier in the day, the Dodgers were drawing a run total higher than either of the teams in Coors Field, which is just bonkers. But it's kind of justified going up against Luke Weaver in this hitting environment in Cincinnati with their outrageous lineup. Top to bottom, you can roster Dodgers here. Confirmed version of the lineup. First time I'm seeing it. Okay, so we do get David Peralta instead of Outman, like I suspected we might. Outman was projected in the 8th spot in the version of the lineup that I had when I was writing the article. But I kind of like Peralta hitting 6th here a little bit better for just the idea of continuing a run of sequencing, of his just veteran ability. He's got only moderate power at this point, and he's only hitting 242, 277, 348. So I don't want to get carried away with that concept, but I've seen more from Peralta over time, and he only cost 2,400 in the outfield on both sites. So I think a nice little lefty differentiator. I'll sacrifice the power upside that I would have gotten from Outman in small doses. Jason Hayward can kind of replace that. He's been good for power this season. 6 home runs at 245 ISO and only 130 plate appearances. Obviously, the top of the lineup is just stellar. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, Max Muncy, JD Martinez. That's a dynamite 5 if you can figure out how to afford it just as a straight line stack. Will Smith on the FanDuel slate, obviously not a $5,500 pitcher, but I think you can play him as a first baseman. He's a catcher, but you can play him as if he was a first baseman on FanDuel. Play him alongside Freddie Freeman. Play him instead of Freddie Freeman if you absolutely have to. They're equally talented players. They're both very, very good. Getting Mookie Betts for $4,000 on the FanDuel slate with 3 position eligibility, including second base and shortstop, is an outrageous bargain in this spot. That's just insane. Mookie should be the most popular player on the slate. If he's not, I don't know what we're doing here. He costs $4,000, but that's perfectly fine. Like, that is just an outrageously good spot. He should be 42, 43, 45 with that positional eligibility and his talent. That's just outrageous. So I think that's a great spot. 6,000 on the DK slate with second and outfield eligibility is probably the right price, but still a good spot. So you're going to Dodgers all day, up and down the lineup, no problem. Luke Weaver, a little bit better probably for overall talent than what his reputation is. I talked about it in the article, talked about it in his last start. I think he had an okay outing in the last start, kind of justify what I was saying, but a 4.22 xFIP underneath the 5.36 ERA. Maybe the Yanks should trade Rizzo for Dahlbeck. Let's not get carried away. I would trade Donaldson and a prospect for Dahlbeck, and I'd stick Dahlbeck at third base. I'll give you Oswald Peraza, Josh Donaldson. I don't know if I want to go to Peraza. He's been playing pretty well in the minors, and we might need him to replace Volpe. I think there's a deal there. Not that they're going to do it. They did make that Greg Allen deal earlier in the year, but I don't think they're going to do it. Sox had Dahlbeck at shortstop one game. It didn't go well. Dahlbeck does have multi-position, like actual baseball talent. He's a utility guy who can play basically every position. Yeah, I retracted it, Anthony. I'm not throwing Peraza out to the Wolves just yet. But I do think they need to do something with these depth options that they have in the infield and maybe acquire some talent in other spots. They're just too thin, right? I know he got sent down recently finally, but Oswaldo Cabrera got way too many opportunities at this level. I know he's a good utility guy, but it just wasn't pretty. IKF, just not a guy who belongs in the regular starting lineup for the Yankees. So there's problems with that lineup, but yeah, I would like to see Dahlbeck here. Let's move on. Let's talk about things that are actually important for tonight's slate. I was saying Luke Weaver, I'm not going to play him in this spot. I do think he's a little bit better than his reputation suggests. That's supported by the 4.22 xFIP, the 22.5% strikeouts, and actually a really good walk rate at only 4.8%. But he's just allowed way too much premium contact and power, which has to be the focus here with the Dodgers in town. 11.2% barrels, 44% hard hits, a 5.88% home run rate. Fire away with Dodgers bats. I don't really care about what the ownership on the Dodgers is going to be. I expect it will be outrageous. Wow, TJ for Jake DeGrom, according to Willie K. That sucks. See ya in 2025, Jake. Sucks for the Rangers. Sucks for baseball in general. It's not overly surprising, right? With a guy who's that frequently injured, you kind of figured it would come. But that sucks. I like Jake DeGrom. He's a generationally talented pitcher, just outrageously good. I don't need to fill you guys in on these details, but just that, yeah, that's a bummer. Bleh. Let me see if I can break the news to some friends. Me and my buddies basically it's like competitive information sharing in our text message chain. I'm sure you guys are like that with your group chats. Let me see. TJ J for DeGrom. Womp womp. This is thrilling broadcasting and a very good use of a minute of time in our tight crunch on this show. All right, so big slate. Got to keep rolling. The Reds. I think the Reds are playable against Tony Gonsolin here. We get Ellie in his debut. Ellie De La Cruz, like we talked about at the top of the show. He's not leading off. He's hitting cleanup, which I like even better. That's great. I kind of liked him in the leadoff spot, too. You take advantage of some of the speed. You get maybe an extra plate appearance out of him. But cleanup Ellie, hitting behind Fraley, McLean, India. That's a dynamite top end. Bolt in Spencer Steer, who's been playing really, really well. I really like the top five here for the Reds. You can throw Stuart Fairchild into the mix. They're going up against Tony Gonsolin, who's an effective, talented veteran pitcher. But somewhere between the 1.77 ERA on the surface and the 5.19 xFIP that he's got under the covers is probably the truth of Tony Gonsolin. His 17.7% strikeout rate this year is a little bit lower than he's been over time. I think he was like 23 and change last year, 27 the year before that in small-ish samples. But Gonsolin's talented enough. I think you can throw a few shares of him at these Reds, even in the ballpark, even with Ellie in the lineup. He's a rookie making his debut. Let's not get completely carried away here. It's a price and expectation-based thing there. But I think you can grab a few shares of cheap Gonsolin, particularly SP2 on DK at 8,000, probably with a limited amount of ownership on him. You can go there with the expectation of a few additional strikeouts and some quality. It's not great. The ballpark is bad. They were still only drawing like a 4.6 implied team total, though, so it was like a mid-range run total for the Reds. Maybe that went up a little bit with Ellie coming into the lineup here, but yeah, I don't want to bury the lead. Min price, Ellie De La Cruz on DraftKings, $2,800 Ellie De La Cruz. He's a shortstop on DK. He's a third baseman on FanDuel. So you have a decision point or a flex point anyway with him and Steer, both at third base on FanDuel. Very different positioning from site to site for this team as I look at it. But I think you can roster some Reds at least in the top five. And then, a few oddball shares of Stuart Fairchild, maybe some Tyler Stevenson, maybe particularly where you need catchers on DK. Stevenson hasn't been great, like I said yesterday, but he did hit his third home run of the year. Willie says, at least the Mets replaced DeGrom with a Wash Verlander Scherzer combo. Yeah, who are going to give them like a similar innings total at this point. But at least those guys are pitching, whether they're pitching well or not. It's been ugly. So Dodgers bats, Reds bats. Smattering of Tony Gonsolin. No need for Luke Weaver here. I think we move on. Dodgers, major opportunity, but I think they'll be very highly owned here. I expect the Mets lineup has been confirmed. Yeah, we'll try and blaze through this one. Is there rain in Atlanta? I'm not sure if there's rain. Watch the weather. I didn't have time to check it. And the place where I get my lineups has been very weird with how they're reporting weather this season, so that's no help. This is the Mets, not the Braves. All right, that's confirmed. Looks basically as expected. Brett Beatty dropping from the 5th spot to the 7th spot with Vogelback moving up. That's a either or kind of a spot. Beatty obviously the preferred option, the premium prospect, but Vogelback over time, decent lefty stick against a righty pitcher. But I kind of like Bryce Elder here. 9,400, 10,000. He's been pitching well. He's not a premium strikeout guy, but pitches effectively deep into ball games and has been pitching clean innings. 1.92 ERA, a 3.64 xFIP. Another guy who is decent at keeping the ball in the yard, keeping it down, 6.5 degree launch angle, 1.51% home run rate, despite 47.3% hard hits, 91.1 miles an hour average exit velo. If he makes a mistake, the ball might travel to like a Pete Alonso. That could be dangerous, but you can see he's checking Pete's power number at only 6.99 in the home run model. So I'm not going to get carried away with shares of Mets here. Maybe a few stacks. If you're doing it, you're grabbing Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso. They're two best players for the season. And then you bolt in like a Lindor who's been scuffling but is discounted for it. Maybe some Jeff McNeil, who is a hit tool specialist but a correlated scoring piece. Some Vogelback, some Marte, some Brett Beatty. Eduardo Escobar in the bottom of the lineup. The return of Omar Narvaez. I didn't spot that. Moderate stick as a veteran catcher, only 17 plate appearances on the season. Lefty bat, 3,200, 2,600. If you're going to a bunch of Mets, you stick Narvaez in there. He's a better bat than Tomas Nido would have been, but he's probably not the hitter, at least in the long term, that Francisco Alvarez will be overall. I don't want to say he's not the hitter because Narvaez has been an effective enough hitter at the major league level. So Mets in small doses, but certainly I think Bryce Elder, I expect another pitcher who will probably go under owned for what he's done so far this season and where he comes in price wise. The matchup isn't ideal, but I think you can get away with it. Watch what's going on with the rain though, because like I said, if that one's got rain in the works, you might limit your exposure to the pitcher here. Carlos Carrasco on the other side, I think is targetable with these Braves bats. You're seeing some decent power marks for the Braves. Obviously Acuna, Olsen, Riley, Murphy you can go to for power all day long, plus Ozzy Albies, plus Marcelo Ozuna. Oh, don't sleep on Eddie Rosario. Oh, don't sleep on Orlando Arcia down the bottom of the lineup. This Braves lineup is just outrageous. You can go to them from top to bottom. Even Mikey Harris down the bottom has been struggling badly in terms of the 168, the 254, 252, a .084 ISO, a 40 WRC plus. Missed a lot of the season. Hashed around into form. 134 plate appearances at this point, though. This is ugly so far. But what you hopefully are supported by is the 9.2% barrels, 44.8% hard hits. That's coming up to the range of where he was last year when he won the Rookie of the Year in the NL. 19 home runs, 20 stolen bases last year. We certainly want to be ahead of the curve when he comes around. So I'll roster some Michael Harris as a wraparound. You can even go like a 5-man from the bottom 5 here. Rosario, Ozzy Albies, Marcelo Ozuna, Arcia, and Harris. That's a lot of positional and price offsets with a ton of power upside. There are... look at all these home runs here. I mean, that's 4 home runs is not a huge total from Arcia, but he's also slashing 303, 361, 447, and creating runs 21% better than average. For 2,700 with 3 position eligibility on FanDuel, 3,800 at shortstop on DK. For a guy that nobody plays, that's pretty decent production. So I like going to Arcia there as a little mix and match guy. So Braves bats, Bryce Elder, Mets bats, no real need to go to Carrasco. I will say he's been effective in his last 2 straight starts against decent competition. So if he gives you 6 innings at 5,900, 6,900, you could probably grab a few SP2 shares and not be making a mistake as a total dart throw. But I just believe much more in the Braves bats side of this equation. And I just think you don't need to do it. It's a deep slate. There's a lot of ways to go. If Carlos Carrasco burns you, hey, this show was free. Orioles and Brewers. Another weird pitching matchup here. A couple veteran guys. Freddie Peralta struggling kind of this season. Another guy having a weird year. 60 1/3 innings, 23% strikeouts. Has been giving up home runs on power this year, which he normally is very good at limiting. Hard hits are up to 36.2%, up from 31.3 last year and 31.1 the year before over fair samples. 78 innings last year, 144 1/3 the year before. 9.6% barrels is like triple last year's mark almost. That's concerning. The home runs have obviously gone up and alongside all of that contact. So it's a little bit disconcerting to see Peralta giving up that much premium contact, that many home runs. Probably a little bit of bad luck, a little bit of happenstance in there. But if the arsenal's not working as effectively, you can see the dip in strikeouts. 33.6% down to 27.1% year over year the last 2 years. And then another dip down to 23% this year. That gets concerning, and it's mostly around the called strikes. 11.9% swinging is roughly equivalent to 12.2 from last year. So just not getting the called strikes that we want from Freddie here. So that's all baked into the $7,700 price on DK. I think he is viable at that DK price as an SP2, especially as a cheap SP1 if you want to go bargain and roster some really expensive bats, which you kind of might need to do given that we want to get to a lot of Dodgers. There's a Coors Field game to deal with, some other stuff. I think you might want to look at some cheap pitching options. Cheap like for across 2 spots, not cheap across like as a descriptor for 1 spot. You get me. So pair 2 cheap pitchers is what I'm trying to say. 89 is kind of inflated on the FanDuel slate. He still projects fairly well. I still believe in the talent, and 23% strikeouts is effective enough. If he doesn't give up the power, doesn't give up the run creation, we get 6 clean. I think there's enough there for Freddie that I'll probably go back to it, but I'm not going to get carried away with it beyond the field like I did a couple times already this season. I will temper my expectations at this point with what I'm getting from Freddie. It's not been pretty. Kyle Gibson on the other side, again, another guy. He's basically an innings eater at this point. 71 2/3 is a good innings total in 12 starts, but the results haven't been great. He had one really good start against, the Tigers. I think he struck out like 12. That was several weeks ago at this point. 3.89 ERA, a 4.61 xFIP, only 15.9% on the strikeout rate, 8.5% swinging, 25.7% CSW. If you're choosing a guy in this matchup, it's still Freddie based on the strikeout upside, based on the swinging strikes, the CSW rate that are both higher. You go to Freddie here at similar pricing on both sites all day long. I think he can take some shares of the Brewers, It's not a great spot. Free $11, quote unquote free, $11, $12 soda cups from Yankee Stadium are sponsoring this show today. I have so many of these. You guys have probably seen them on shows over the years, but like those little soda cups, it's so touristy and everything, and I feel so stupid when I'm on the D train. But if I buy a soda at the game, I'm not going to throw away the goddamn cup that cost me $12. So I end up carrying it home, and I've got like 40 of those things over the years. It's not even a collection. It's not like I'm going out of my way to collect them. It's just like I use them. They're a good cup to have, and it's like I just don't want to throw the damn thing away. Sound like my dad. Oh my God, that's scary. Anyway, Orioles bats. If you want to go to Orioles bats, let's see if we got the confirmed. Let me see what's here. All right, yeah, we do. So bear with me one sec. Orioles, could have just dropped it in there. All right. Orioles bats. Adam Frazier filling in for Cedric Mullins is a downgrade to their leadoff spot. Adley, obviously a tremendous catcher, one of the best in baseball already. 285, 402, 435, 36% better than average creating runs. You can play Adley on both sides, play him like he was a first baseman on the FanDuel slate. Santander, Austin Hayes, totally good options in the heart of the lineup there. Santander, the switch hitter, tons of power, 9 home runs, 212 ISO, 122 WRC plus. Hayes having a nice season, 301, 341, 47, 187 ISO, 28% better than average creating runs. Ryan Mountcastle, 4,600, 3,300 across first base. All his power upside for that price is very nice to get to. 15.6% barrel rate, 45.6% hard hit. Yeah, I heard myself say nice. 11 home runs in total on the season. What he needs to do is pull his walk rate in line. 4.7% walks is not enough. It's not like he strikes out at an aggressively bad rate. This is a great strikeout rate to have with this much premium contact, this many home runs, and a 201 ISO. It's just the lack of walks, the lack of on-base acumen that's hurting him in his run creation mark. So he's at a 91 WRC plus, but I don't totally buy this in terms of who this guy is. He's going to be a star based on this premium contact. He's an outrageously good hitter at the plate. Needs to figure out the walks, and everything else will come into line. So I like Mountcastle. Ramon Urias, usable piece. Ryan O'Hearn, meh. Jorge Mateo, price is way, way down. He's had an atrocious May into June at this point, but the speed is still there. It's not like his legs fell off. So if he gets on base, he'll be running, might wrap around to the top of the lineup. You can use Mateo in small doses. I skipped over the fifth hitter completely because he doesn't belong in the lineup. He probably shouldn't be in Major League Baseball. That man is Aaron Hicks. He's blocking a kid named Colton Cowser, who's tearing up the minors. Decent power and speed prospect. I don't know why the hell this team signed Aaron Hicks after sitting here in the division for the last few years, watching him play poorly for the Yankees. It makes no goddamn sense. I can't even justify putting him in a DFS lineup. I mean, it's just based on the spot that he's in the lineup, right? But a 3.4% barrel rate, 25.4% hard hits, 1 home run, a .88 ISO. What the hell are they doing? It makes no sense to me. So you don't skip him every single time. If you're building 150 Orioles stacks, he should be in 5 of them. But that's about it. Maybe 10 at the most. You can tell I don't like Aaron Hicks, I think. The Brewers bats against Kyle Gibson. Christian Yelich, Owen Miller, Rowdy Tellez off the top. That's a nice little straight line. I think you can roster those guys just kind of in order there. Let me see if we got the confirmed on this one too. We don't. So yeah, those guys basically in order. You can bolt on William Contreras there. And then it depends which of these crazy value plays we've gotten from this team over the last few days. We got Luis Urias back in the lineup. I expect that he'll play today. He's a regular for this team. Guy is a good power hitter from the middle infield. 16 home runs in 472 plate appearances last year, 23 and 572 2 years ago. Don't sleep on Luis Urias. And they brought him back at the dead minimum with 3 position eligibility on the FanDuel slate. Thank you, Blue Site. 4,300 and second base, third base eligible on DK. Still probably a little cheap for who this guy is in terms of his power upside. So I like getting to Luis Urias here. I think that's a very playable part in this lineup. If you get Perkins, he's playable at 2,200, 2,000. Not a guy I'm saying is going to turn into a star all of a sudden at like 26, 27, whatever he is. But a guy with enough prospect pedigree, enough of like mid-range production in the minors anyway, to be in these lineups at very cheap prices, I think helps you offset some other things in these lineups. Like I'd rather go to him in some shares anyway than a Brian Anderson, than a Bryce Turang. Turang, 198, 244, 290, 3 home runs, 8 stolen bases. Joey Weimer, 6 homers, 9 stolen bases. if you get John Singleton in the lineup, I think it's the same deal. If you get him at the dead minimum with the power that he showed throughout the minors, it hasn't been good at the major league level. That's why he's 31 and like a quad A player. But if he lands in the heart of the order again at the dead minimum price for our purposes, I don't care that the Brewers are making a mistake by putting him in a major league lineup at this point in his career. I care that he could hit a home run off Kyle Gibson for the mid price. That's what we're doing with the Brewers. So for me, this is some shares of Freddie, no Kyle Gibson, some bats on both sides. Probably more interested in Brewers bats than Orioles bats. Cardinals against Dane Dunning. You go to the Cardinals bats here. They're cheap. I don't really know why they're so cheap. There's some talent on the bottom end here that's very cheap on FanDuel, pretty cheap on the DK slate. Brendan Donovan up top is cheap. Even the stars, like these are arguably pretty low prices, especially for Gorman. $49.35. What does this kid have to do to prove that he should be at a higher price at this point? 15.4% barrel. Why am I so angry today? I don't know why I'm like, it's certainly not any of your guys' fault, but Gorman is cheap today. So I think that's an opportunity. You're going up against Dane Dunning, who is an effective enough pitcher, but was doing better in that long relief role that they stuck him in when Jake DeGrom got hurt. He filled in twice, came in, had nice little short stints. They were using him for 2-3 innings at a time out of the pen. Then he had to fill in the starting rotation. He's sitting at a 4.38 xFIP, a 16.6% strikeout rate. Even at cheap prices, I don't think you need to tangle with the Cardinals with Dane Dunning here. If you wanted to do it at 72 as an SP2 low-end dart throw on DK, we've seen just enough from him in spots over time to maybe put a little faith in it, but it's not good. And the Cards are one of the baseball's best teams for run creation this year against right-handed pitching, so I just don't like the spot. I'm going to Cards bats. I'm going to Donovans, the Goldschmidts, the Gormans, the Arenados of the world. And then on the back end, you can mix and match these pieces to your heart's content. Tommy Edman, one of my favorite wraparound plays when he's sitting at the bottom of the lineup here. So you can go to some Edman. Let me see what's in the actual. It does look like we've got it confirmed. I think it's exactly the same as what I'm showing on the screen in the confirmed here. So yeah, you go to Cards for sure. And then I think we can go to some of the Rangers bats. High scoring team in the game so far this season. Plenty of talent up and down this lineup. Certainly enough to get to a guy like Matthew Liberatore, who has not been great. I'm just vamping a little bit as I'm dropping their lineup in here, which I think you guys can see on the screen. Let me jump over to StreamYard, make sure I'm still showing all of this. Willie K says he's getting a lot of Rocky stacks, looks like, preparing himself for a heartache once again. Yeah, I kind of feel that too, buddy. Anthony Falia asks, what does POW T mean under X? So X is just where I dropped in the my home run model. POW is a kind of a custom power index mark that kind of informs some of the home run. Like you'll see good correlation between high guys in this and high home run rates, right? So that I forget exactly what goes into it because I created it years and years ago. I don't know if you guys, I don't think you guys can see the formula that I've got there, but it calculates on a different tab, so it wouldn't matter. That's just a lookup formula. So it's just my personal power number. You can think of it like a ISO. It functions differently. It doesn't track to ISO in terms of what the numbers say, but it should kind of track to high ISO guys would have a high number in that. But it's a number I created years ago, and it kind of informed some things in my process here. No real need to worry about it. No real need for me to show it, but you guys can look at it to your heart's content. I'll leave it up there. Damn, the Rangers didn't insure DeGrom's contract either. Oof. I mean, they've got tons of money down there with their TV deal they did a few years ago and everything, but yeah, not insuring that was probably a mistake given his injury history. Yeah, Colton Cowser did get banged up the other week. Larry C. And yeah, Westberg also needs a call-up. Just loaded with prospects in that organization. So I was talking about the Rangers against Liberatore. Rangers lineup, Semien, Seager, Lowe, Garcia, Young, Robbie Grossman, Garver, Duran. So no Heim. You get Garver instead of Heim, instead of the version of the lineup that has them both in it. It's a bit of a ding not having Heim in the lineup, but Garver's a dynamite replacement for him when you have to go to only one catcher anyway. So I think you just roll with the Rangers up and down. Ezekiel Duran back in the lineup. Talked about Leody Taveras a little bit yesterday. Just really productive season from Leody in terms of the hit tool, the run creation mark. So he's been a frisky little hitter for cheap prices, low ownership at the bottom of the lineup. Robbie Grossman, I don't love hitting sixth, but at least he only cost 27, 28 across sites. 6 homers on the year for Robbie. A veteran guy who can get into one from time to time. Not great in that spot, but this team is outrageously talented 1 through 5. You can see in the WRC Plus, everybody with the exception of Grossman. When I had it with Heim in there in the projected lineup, it was everybody in the lineup. Very, very aggressively above average for run creation this season. Tons of power, tons of premium contact. Several guys who are good at avoiding strikeouts. Several high strikeout guys, but that doesn't doesn't really lead me to Liberatore. I don't think he's figured it out at the major league level yet. 18% strikeouts, 12% walks, only 2 starts, 11 innings, 1 relief appearance, but just hasn't been good, hasn't been effective for the strikeouts. 64, 65, it's a dart if you want to do it, but why do you want to throw that kid with low strikeout totals so far in the majors at a Rangers lineup that has been just this good? So Rangers bats, Cardinals bats, neither pitcher. Coors Field, roster the bats. Moving on. Oh, whoops. I didn't actually mean to click on one there. We'll talk about it really quickly. Brebbia is an opener, probably going to be followed by Sean Manaea. I doubt Manaea repeats that bulk relief appearance trick out of the pen here at Coors Field. If you want to take your shots on DK, maybe you get it against the lousy Rockies lineup. He's a talented enough guy over time with the strikeout upside. I haven't seen an absolute guarantee that the team said that that's who's going to be appearing, but that's the general expectation that that's who you're getting in bulk relief. I fully expect Brebbia to come out for an inning or two and just take the top off the Rockies lineup here the first time through. 34.7% strikeout rate, 8,100, 5,500 though across sites. Doesn't really make sense on either site. Those prices, if the FanDuel price was the DK price, maybe you get away with it in that like weird opener play. But openers should really only be rostered if they're like 4,000 with 2 to 3 inning upside. I don't think we get that here. And it's a Coors Field game. Charlie Blackmon, Ryan McMahon, Diaz, Randall Grichuk, Nolan Jones, Brenton Doyle are my group of hitters that I want from the Rockies. I would take shares of Alan Trejo. I would take shares of Ezekiel Tovar. I wouldn't go out of my way to take shares of Jurickson Profar out of my lineup, but it's bad. So, yeah, Larry Berbia's price is out of line on DK. That doesn't make any sense. Somebody just probably saw 34.7% strikeouts, figure maybe he was going 3-4 innings and assigned a price. Or maybe the model, I don't know, I assume it does it with an algorithm. It's not actually a person, right? But the algorithm probably picked up on the strikeout rate and not the idea of how many innings he's going to pitch. They need to figure that out to price those guys a little bit more effectively. Jurickson Profar, not been good this season, but hitting second every single day. If you're building a bunch of Rocky stacks, you do need to stick them into them. So don't let me talk you out of it, but I don't like the player. I like McMahon. Blackman's been more a slap hitter correlated scoring piece, 5 home runs on the season, a 167 ISO. McMahon's your power hitter in this lineup. Grichuk, the memory of power, 46.3% hard hits, only 1 home run, but overall hitting the ball very effectively. And then Jones and Doyle, I've talked about a number of times. Lefty and a righty from late in the lineup. 2 fairly high-end prospects who can hit for a little bit of power potential. 4 home runs on the season for Doyle from the right side. Only 1 so far in 31 plate appearances from Jones. But I expect both of those guys to hit. So they're semi-interesting if you're going to Rockies. I think the Rockies will probably be the lower-owned of the 2 teams like they typically are. They're the worst of the 2 teams. Dinelson Lamet. Only saw a couple of innings from him the other day. Happened to earn himself a second start in a Coors Field game. I don't want any part of it. 5,100, 5,700. You guys can go there. I don't think it's gonna really work out. In innings out of the 13 2/3 innings out of the pen and the 1 start that lasted, 3 and change innings, gave up 5 runs. It wasn't pretty. 23.3% strikeout rate, 16.4% walks. Throw Giants bats at this. Don't overthink this. The only thing you worry about here is the overall ownership in a Coors Field game. But on such a big slate with so many options, so many low-owned combinations, I was talking about it in our Discord this morning, and it bears repeating. I am so much more concerned with the idea of what are the actual ownership values in combination with one another that are going into the lineups. What are they combining with? What other team is the Giants combining with? And within that, who are the players in those lineups that are stringing together? Broadcast tip, always put your hands in front of your face. I learned that from Stefan on SNL. So if you're going to Giants, I think you can do it, and I think you can get aggressive about it despite it being a popular spot in a Coors Field game, because you're going to offset it with under-owned plays from other lineups, or you get them with under-owned pitchers. Roster them, leave a little bit of salary on the table. That differentiates you. I think people get way too carried away with this team will be highly owned without defining who within that lineup will be highly owned. And I think people get way too carried away with individual ownership in and of itself. So I don't really want to worry about that too much here. I think it's an important factor. I think the leverage, the disproportionate nature of ownership based on where the field is, based on where the opportunity is, and the prices are, is more important than the actual, this guy is carrying a 25% ownership projection. Sometimes on a large slate, 12 games, 24 teams to choose from, if you end up with Jock Peterson, 45% owned, okay, that's a little high. Let's undercut that, right? I think you guys get what I'm saying, though. So I don't want to harp on it too much. I wrote a few paragraphs about it in the Discord. Hop in there if you want more. So Giants bats up and down the lineup. Lamont Wade, Thairo Estrada, Jock Peterson back in the lineup. Two dynamite options. Cheap prices on both of those hitters. Jock Peterson, major power from the left side. It could hit 2 home runs against Dinelson Lamet on his way to the ballpark. So really like Jock Peterson at price. J.D. Davis having a very nice year. Still 4,700, 3,600. Don't know what he does to get his price to go up. Mike Yastrzemski, cheap from the left side of the plate with all his power late in the lineup. Mitch Haniger, cheap from late in the lineup from the right side of the plate with all his power upside. 1 through 6 at least. This lineup plays like crazy. Blake Sabol is a cheap catcher option from the left side. I think is definitely in play. 10.6% barrels, 42.4% hard hits, 7 home runs on the season for Sabol. That's kind of sneaky as a catcher for 42 on DK in a Coors Field game. I expect he'll be relatively low owned, from late in the lineup. People who need catchers on the DK slate will probably go to it, but maybe not as much as they should, given he's actually a talented guy. It's not just the cores of it. So he's cheap for what he is. Casey Schmidt, Patrick Bailey, perfectly playable. Bailey gives you a second catcher to mix and match with on DK. Couple of games to go. Rapidly turning this into a live before lock show. I think the Stochastic guys have started up already over at their site. Appreciate everybody who's stuck with me over here. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe. By the way, guys, you guys friggin' rock. I was looking at numbers comparing myself to unfairly to the Stochastic totals for views yesterday for like their percentage of likes and everything. And like, you guys are killing it for me. So I love it. It's keep it up. I appreciate the hell out of it. You guys keep that up. I'm going to keep throwing all the content I can and putting in all the hard work for you because I love that, and it's a reciprocal relationship in my mind. I will never sit here and try and think that I'm better than anybody. I hope it's an open exchange of ideas too, and like you guys put thoughts in the chat, ask questions, and I'll ask questions of you, and it's an exchange, right? This is not me saying I am better at this than you and I know better and blah blah blah. So throw me some likes, throw me some love, but I love you guys right back, and you've been killing it for me already, so hopefully I kill it back for you. Cubbies, the Angels, 2 low-end pitchers, 2 frisky stacks here. I think we can go to Cubs bats. I think we go to Angels bats. Decent power projections on the... oh, shit, I put the wrong... Leighton Thomas, Luis Garcia, Joey Meneses is not playing for the Angels tonight. I grabbed the wrong one and I dropped the Nationals into the wrong spot here. Let me fix that real quick. Angels are not confirmed yet, it doesn't look like, or at least not on Schmabs. Let me drop that out of here. We'll go back to the... that's better. So now we're actually seeing it. Some decent power marks, some obvious names in the superstars. Ohtani, Trout, you grow to all day long, every day, regardless of who the pitcher on the mound on the other side is. The only thing you worry about with those guys is a little bit of price, but they're well worth it. 28 combined home runs, just dynamite options up top for them. But Brendan Drury, ton of power for 4,100, 3,000 with multi-position first and second base. 10 home runs on the season, a 239 ISO that exceeds Trout's ISO for the year and is pushing up towards Ohtani's. Hunter Renfroe also was pushing those guys in terms of his home run total. He's got 11 on this season. His ISO's dipped down to 199. He's got a 104 WRC plus, scuffling a little bit, but I very much believe in Hunter Renfroe. And at 3,700, 2,900, I will take my shots against Hayden Wesneski. Wesneski, 11.6% barrels, 16.6 degree average launch angle, 5.49% home runs. He's playing right into home run hitting and power upside. 8 starts, 43 innings, hasn't figured out the strikeout stuff at the major league level. Had some decent strikeout rate seasons in the minors. I think there's maybe a little meat on the bone for the Cubs going forward, but it's not there yet. 4.47 xFIP, a 4.81 ERA. Grab some Angels bats here. I don't really need shares of Wesneski. If you wanted to say he finds the strikeouts today against 23.2% strikeouts in that projected lineup, so be it. 6,700 is not an incorrect price on DK if you wanted to do it. I think he's put up 1 or 2 okay DK scores so far this year, but it's not great. It's not a great lineup to do it against. So you're going to Angels up and down. I don't love the Gio Urshela part of it. Matt Thace is fine as a cheap catcher, especially if he hits 5th. That's a good spot for a $2,500 catcher with a little bit of power upside. 3 homers, 10.8% barrel rate for Thace at $2,500. That's a nice little spot on the DK slate. Jared Walsh also, if he's hiding in the lineup, especially I just noticed that he's mid-priced on DK. That's a mistake price. Jared Walsh hit, 29 home runs 2 years ago? 13 last year in 551 and, 15 last year in 454. And yeah, 29 in 585 2 years ago. Don't sleep on Jared Walsh if he's in the lineup at mid-price on DK. That's a mistake. That's a good opportunity there. I like that idea. So get some Jared Walsh, 2,300 on FanDuel too. Good price. You can put Drury at second. You can put Walsh at first. Run away with the two outfielders and be done with things with the Angels lineup. Take some shares of Cubs. Going up against Tyler Anderson, who has not been good this year. 13.8% strikeouts in 10 starts, 10.5% walks, a 6.06 xFIP, 5.47 ERA. He'll probably settle into, a little bit better in terms of the runs allowed because he's okay at limiting power over time. He's a decent enough real life pitcher from time to time, but there's no upside here for strikeouts. So I'm not going to shares of Tyler Anderson, even against the fairly free swinging Cubs lineup. Could he find 5 or 6 over 6 clean innings? He could. Is he going to? It seems doubtful. So I'm more inclined to go to Cubs. They're cheap. It's another spot where I kind of believe in their on-base skills. I was talking about this with Snell yesterday. I kind of want to go back to that notion of all this on-base acumen up at the top of the lineup, and then all the power that they've got through guys like Dansby Swanson, Ian Happ, Sia Suzuki, Patrick Wisdom, Yan Gomes even. Yan Gomes, 3,100 and 2,600 for a catcher who has 7 home runs in 128 plate appearances and 11.1% barrel rate where you need catchers. That's a nice little bargain going up against Tyler Anderson. That's a non-threatening pitcher. Basically an entirely right-handed lineup with the switch hitter Ian Happ in the middle of it. Chris Morel, if you get him down toward the bottom, I don't think this one was confirmed either, was it? I don't even know where this game went. There it is. Too much going on. Yeah, not confirmed yet. So if you get Morel, he's cooled off dramatically after hitting 9 home runs in his 9 home runs in 9 plate appearances to start his year. It was something like 9 in 35 or 45 plate appearances. Now he's at the same 9 over 85, but still a good player. He was a guy that we expected to be a good player coming into this season. Got hurt. We didn't expect him to come roaring back like that. Nobody did. Nobody does that. But he's a guy who I think will settle in for nice production at 4,900, 3,100. Yeah, I heard it. Trey Mancini, viable veteran bat in the middle of the lineup there, or in the upper back end of the lineup there. But especially this part of the lineup here, the top 6, kind of want to get to, string in some Morel. I'd rather have Morel hitting up here, but we'll see what we get. But I think you go to Cubs bats. Don't really need either pitcher. So bats on both sides of this one for me. And I think the run totals were supporting that as well. We had healthy run totals in this one on both sides. 4.98, 4.99 for the Cubbies, 5.11 for the Angels. 2 healthy run totals. And in the last game of the day, we have 2 fairly low run totals for two teams that should be better than they are. I think that's fair to say at least. A lot of good players on both of these teams, but not creating a ton of runs, not doing exactly what we expect of them. Certainly the Padres suffered from some struggles from some key players. Xander Bogaerts was hot, then cooled. Juan Soto was cool and hot. Manny Machado got hurt, was cool. So it's a top-heavy lineup that was scuffling along in some spots for the Pods. And then the Mariners have struggled a lot, and they strike out way, way too much. Somebody in I think the Stochastic Discord this morning mentioned dynamite spot for Joe Musgrove. I actually do agree with that. There's a ton of strikeout in this Mariners lineup. 4 of these hitters are among the league worst in strikeout rate for the season. You can see a 26.3% strikeout rate for the projected lineup here. That includes Ty France at 15.8 and JP Crawford at 19.5. If you take the next 7 hitters there, that becomes a 28.7% strikeout rate. Aggressive free swingers. Musgrove has not been great this season. He dropped the weight on his toe in spring training, missed a month, came back, 36 and a third, 7 starts, 4.71 ERA, a 4.44 xFIP, 21.3% strikeouts, 10.5% swinging. I think he's rounding into form a little bit. He's projecting just fine for me. The model doesn't really know much about those clunky outings at the beginning. So just the idea of getting Joe Musgrove at 78-83 against all that strikeout upside here, I definitely like it. I think you hedge with a few Mariner stacks. There's a degree of, Musgrove hasn't been that great this year, lurking in the back of the mind, but it's in those prices. Musgrove is a much more expensive pitcher when he's going right. So you're already getting him at the discount. I think you just take the discount, be happy about it. We'll see where his popularity comes in. If he's hyper popular, maybe you get away from it a little bit and undercut the field while still going to him. In a sense of if he's, in single pitcher terms, if he's 30% owned, maybe you go to 20, or if he's more realistically 18% owned, maybe you go to 12, 15. But I want some Musgrove here. I would grab a few shares of Mariners bats. JP up at the top of the lineup has kind of dipped in quality since they moved him up there. He had a really good on base percentage when they moved him up, and I was thinking, hey, good spot for that guy. And he's just not gotten on base ever since. So maybe he just belongs at the bottom of a lineup. Ty France, decent hit tool, more power last year. Dipping in the hit tool, dipping the power, but still a 16% better than average mark for run creation. Julio, obviously scuffling along, but 10 home runs, 12 stolen bases this season, 106 in the WRC plus. Coming around, I think, 10.9% barrel rate, 52.7% hard hits. We're going to look back at the end of the season and see a Julio who was just fine and kind of looks like he did last year. So I'm not worried about him. Kelenic cooled a little bit after the outrageous start, but the price has come down right alongside the cooling. So I think you can go to Kelenic, 10 home runs on the season. I think he settles in, more toward the guy he was early this season than the lousy player that he was the last 2 seasons. And he was still barreling the ball, still hitting for power, even when he was atrocious those 2 seasons. So I believe in Kelenic here. Junior Suarez, Cal Raleigh, Teoscar Hernandez, just a dynamite power trio to find that late in the lineup. 5, 6, 7. Those guys are, 2, 3, 4 hitters for a lot of teams in the league. You see all the barrel rate here. You see all the premium contact, the hard hits. There it translates into mid-range home run totals. Very good ISO for Cal Raleigh, 106 WRC plus, the only one in the group above average for run creation. Suarez had a weird start to his year. The numbers are down. The 115 ISO is very strange. 6 home runs, but the contact has come up significantly over the last couple of weeks. He'll be back. He probably won't hit 30 home runs this year, but 25 is still in play for him, or 20 plus is easily in play. Teoscar's been good for power, 9 home runs on the season, but everything else is kind of meh with Teoscar. All those guys strike out outrageously. Mike Ford, hefty strikeout rate in a small, that's only 6 plate appearances. What did he do last year? 26.8% last year it wasn't that many more plate appearances, but 149. Mike Ford's not a good player. Quad A type guy, strikes out too much, non-threatening entity in the back of the lineup. So go to Joe Musgrove. More expensive Logan Gilbert on the other side going up against the Pods. Different kind of a play, but I think an equal play. I think I want to get 2 shares of Logan Gilbert, and I expect he'll be unpopular at the $99.98 price. He's been really good this year. 28.7% strikeout rate. I think he had a little bit of a clunker, if I remember correctly, the last time out. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. I'm not actually looking at the chat, but I'll click back to that tab, see if there's any questions or whatever. Musgrove's numbers got skewed a bit too by the Mexico City game. Yeah, that's a very good point there. And just, a couple clunkers early in the season for a few of these guys who have had limited starts still impact the numbers overall. There was somebody else today that I wrote about that with. Might have been Musgrove. I don't think it was. So I was saying for Logan Gilbert, I love the 28.7% strikeouts. I absolutely love his microscopic walk rate. He's a control command specialist, is reasonably effective at limiting power. 3.15% home runs, could be a little bit lower. 41.2% hard hits, could certainly be lower. 8.2% barrels, but just an effective guy at keeping players off base. Doesn't give up the free pass, so doesn't give too many opportunities to the opposing team. Could definitely limit the weak back end of the Padres lineup here. If he gets through the aggressively good top end, he's got a shot at putting up a decent score. So I'll have some Logan Gilbert. He'll be a little bit lower down my board than some of the other pitching options, though, I think. But I do think he's worth the exposures. Pods, if you're going there, you're going to some Bogarts, Tatis, Soto, Machado for sure. Machado, 4,800, 2,800. That's too cheap for Manny Machado. Don't care about the current year struggles. Don't care that he's maybe playing a little bit banged up, still lingering injuries, whatever it is. It's just too cheap for this guy. We know Manny Machado is a superstar caliber player. So I'll go there. Jake Cronenworth is down year over year. He was a correlated scoring piece, but 202, 320, 356, just not supporting anything for him. So he's been kind of flat. Odor, Carpenter, Grisham, Nola, that's a weak back end. I don't really believe in any of those guys. And I think I'm kind of justified in saying that. The average batting average for that collection of hitters over, fair plate appearances is 183 this season. So on the average, those 5 hitters are below the Mendoza line. That's not good for turning a lineup over. That plays directly into upside for Logan Gilbert here. If you want to talk in terms of on base, same collection of hitters, 294 on base. If you want to talk in terms of ISO, same collection of hitters, 147, WRC plus, 78. It's not a lot to like in the back end of the pod. So that's like a 4 or 5 man lineup, depending on what you think of Cronenworth. Maybe if you're rostering a ton of them, don't entirely skip everybody at the bottom of the lineup, right? You do want to work in some Odor, some Carpenter, some Grisham, but it's begrudging shares and it's small doses. So that's what I think we're doing with the pods. I think that brings us to the end. That is a lot of talking. It's 5:26. So we'll have about 90 minutes or so to build lineups once we're done talking about the pitching board. Get over here and end in our traditional fashion. It's kind of straightforward. There's no real surprises. I took the time to adjust the innings total for like Brebbia, had my 4.5 net, the 4.5 catch all that I was talking about yesterday, that makes sure the model doesn't miss anything. Because sometimes guys come through that like aren't projected for innings on the back end because they're a highly touted rookie that the backbone projections weren't expecting to pitch this year. I fixed some of those guys in terms of hitting. Larry, I think it was Larry that asked about Gary Sanchez and why he was coming up with a 0 in the home run model. After I went and actually added projections for him to have plate appearances this year, that unsurprisingly went up to 10 and change. By the way, if Gary's in the lineup for the Pods, that's another good bat to play from the Padres. Hit another home run last night. So love me some Gary. But looking at the pitchers here, Mitchie Keller up at the top of the board with a bullet in terms of the raw projection. There are concerns about Mitch Keller in every start Mitch Keller will ever make for the rest of his life because of what he did to us. If you've got an abusive spouse, you don't suddenly forgive them and pretend that they've changed their stripes. So Mitch Keller's pitching great. It's a great matchup. It's a great projection. The price is high. In a stupid game against the Athletics, like what better team for him to go completely bust against? But I totally believe I'll have a ton of Mitch Keller today. Don't get me wrong. Logan Gilbert, I like that spot where he's projected at that price. That's a really high projection going up against the Pods, and I think he'll be low owned there. I don't go purely on projection and let that dictate everything. You gotta thread the needle with some of the ownership and what these guys allow for combinations. And I like Musgrove a little bit better given his 8,300, 7,800 price and what I perceive as a better matchup for strikeout upside. But both of those guys in that last game, dynamite way to end your slate, and that could be a situation where nothing is decided until that last game is played, which is obviously a kind of a Yogi Berra way to say things and is true every day, but could be particularly true today. Gausman, good spot against a bad team. Bieber, dicey. We don't know what we're getting with Shane Bieber, but I think there's a little bit more to go with, and I don't think he'll be popular for 92, 96. It obviously comes through in the model. Like I said, I gave it my all trying to squash that down in logical ways to account for what he's been this year, and it just won't get me below like 30. So you kind of believe in Biebs. Similar deal with Freddie Peralta. Hasn't been good. He's at least below the 30 mark, but he's cheap, 8,977. I expect if I just put that directly into the model with no restrictions, you would get a lot of Freddie Peralta here. So it'll be a process-based thing to see how much I get to him. But I kind of believe there's enough upside for him against the Orioles. Hunter Brown, similar situation to Kevin Gausman. He's not Kevin Gausman, or at least not Kevin Gausman yet, but he's Kevin Gausman light in what he's done so far this year, or Kevin Gausman like 28-ish% strikeout rate compared to Gausman's like, what was it, 32? Obviously a bad matchup against the Blue Jays here, but that'll probably push him down in terms of ownership at 10-3, 10-3, 10-3 on both sides. Gonsolin, it's a bad ballpark, but a lousy team that you're throwing them against, and probably a decent amount of ownership to throw them against on the Reds. I don't really love looking at it that way in terms of a pitcher against a highly owned team. That doesn't really work the same way that a low-owned team against a highly owned pitcher might with upside. But I'll take a couple stabs with Gonsolin for dart throws, couple stabs with Giolito against my Yanks. Bad hitting environment, but Yanks without Judge, you can definitely roster a pitcher as good as Giolito against. He hasn't been great this year, but I think we believe enough in Giolito at price especially, and what will probably be fairly low ownership. Don't love going to Liberator, like going to Paxton. Yep. Oh, that's not sorted properly. Sorry. I never sorted that. So yeah, Paxton a little higher up the board at that 31. So like the spot for Paxton going up against those low end Guardians. You got to get a couple strikeouts from him, but I think if he gives a 6, he has a good shot at giving a 6 clean, chasing the win, chasing the quality start where that matters. So you go to Paxton in some doses. Back end, I don't really buy the Liberator number here. For 65-64, if you want to throw a couple of darts, like I said when we were talking about it, I certainly like him better than Jake Irvin, Dane Dunning, James Kaprielian, Carrasco against the Braves. Like, that's probably my comp spot. Carrasco against the Braves doesn't project nearly as well, but if I'm picking low-end starters, Carrasco versus Liberator, I don't believe in either spot. But for price, those are probably your two $6,000 guys. And I don't love either one. I wouldn't tell anybody to put either one of those guys in a lineup today. I don't want to talk somebody who's got a love for either one of those pitchers out of it necessarily, though. Schmidt, I think, has value at his mid-range prices. Good SP2 play at 79 on the DK slate. A little bit of upside for strikeouts. Needs to stay clean for power. Needs to avoid power from the lefties. Elder, I talked about, too. A little bit of high price for where he's projected, but probably going to be fairly low owned. He's a low-end strikeout guy, but if he eats some innings and pitches clean against the Mets, he could give you that weird start. It's a deep enough slate where it's that weird start with a low strikeout total, but a lot of innings and a lot of clean innings and a win and so on and so forth might not make the difference today, and especially not at 10,094. If you had that ability at like 85, 8,000, like a Gonsolin or a Musgrove price, then I think Elder is a little bit more interesting. But I will have a couple of shares. I've missed the boat on Elder too many times this year to not want a few shares. I don't see anybody else that's overly interesting on this board. Do you guys? Anderson, Weaver, Lamet, Brebbia, you're certainly not going to them. Wisniewski, like I said, maybe based on the idea of we thought he was better for strikeouts than he's been, but you don't want to throw him against Trout and Ohtani, really. I think that's about it, gang. Hit the like, hit the subscribe. I'm going to punch out and start building some lineups so I can actually play this slate. A couple good tournaments on the FanDuel slate, a couple good tournaments over on DK. So good luck out there, fellas. Really appreciate everybody who stuck with us hanging out. And that was a lot to talk through. Know the sound of my voice isn't exactly melodious or pleasant to listen to, so I appreciate everybody tolerating it. Hopefully the info is good enough to do it, but I'm going to punch out. I'll see you guys later.